Have you ever had somebody say something to you like, man, my marriage would be great if my wife would just stop doing this thing to me. Or, if her parents just liked me more, or, man, if my job would just treat me the way I deserve to be treated, then my marriage would be right where it needs to be. Or if my husband would just help out more with the kids, then, we would be able to have, a better marriage, or whatever thing it is where there's someone outside of that person that is the reason why the marriage isn't what it should be. Perhaps, if we're honest, and probably all of us should be, there are times when maybe we feel that way ourselves.
Yeah.
Where, man, if our spouse or our in-laws or this other person or this
if they could just get it right,
of me, if they would just do right, then everything would be great in our marriage. That's what we're going to be talking about today, that victim mentality. It can creep in really easily in the modern age in America of self-help and self-care and self-focus. We tend to easily slide into looking at ourselves as the victim of unstoppable and uncaring outside forces. It's destructive in our marriage, and it's not supported by the Bible, period.
Yep. Let's get into that.
Before we jump into today's show, I wanted to ask you to check out our website, brand new website, marriagebydesignpodcast.com. That's marriagebydesignpodcast.com. All of our episodes are available there on that website. Love to have you pop over there, follow us there, and check it out.
If you have a topic that you're wanting more information on or you have questions about, you can search on our website by topic, which is a really great feature.
That's right. And more than anything, guys, please share this with someone that would find it meaningful for them. Without any more delay, let's get to the show. Hi, everybody. I'm Nathan Warnock.
I'm Andrea Warnock, and you've joined us for the Marriage by Design podcast, a time where we talk to you about God's design for marriage, what the Bible has to say about that, and how Nathan and I get to live that out practically, or try to live that out practically.
That's right. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about this idea of a victim mentality. And so what I want to do is start by just defining and identifying a little bit about what does this victim mentality idea mean? How can we identify it in our own marriages or perhaps in the marriages of those we care about around us? And then we're going to move into what the destructive impact of this is, and then finally, how do we overcome it? So let's start by thinking a little bit, babe, about what is this victim mentality. Can you give kind of an overview of what does this look like in our own lives?
So I'm sure that there's everybody out there knows some people who like live their lives this way. They're always a victim of something, whether it's their past or somebody's. They're constantly saying, "Oh, my boss," doesn't matter how many bosses it is, has it out for me. It's always somebody has it out for them. Somebody's mistreating them, but so that's the overt, obvious circumstances, but this creeps into all of our lives in one way or another in certain times. So, having an external focus of control, like believing that your circumstances are controlling your life, or that somebody else is making or breaking the good in your life. Which means blaming others for your problems, really taking a lack of personal responsibility. That's where we see it the most, I would say.
Right.
Just this focus on my problems are because of everyone else and never because I have problems or I have things that I need to fix,
Yeah. I mean, I would say really, excuse me. the biggest thing on this is where's your focus of control? People who have issues with this victim mentality, the focus of control is always external, right? There's someone other than me who has control of my life, right? If I could just get control, I could have a better job, I could have a better marriage, I would be a better father, I would be a better employee, I would have better friends, I would be a member of a church, all these things. But there's all these external reasons why that can't happen. And of course, the real defense mechanism, psychological purpose behind that is motivated by, because it's not in my control, it can never change.
Yeah, and
so I don't need to work to change
it.
Because I don't actually have control anyway. And so this looks like blaming other people for your problems, total lack of personal responsibility, because again, if I don't have any control, then I don't have any responsibility. Feeling helpless and powerless, which can lead to depression and moodiness and those kinds of things. Can lead to someone who's constantly negative and always complaining about their circumstances. Those are all behaviors that are directly destructive to marriage. Nobody wants to be married to someone who's feeling helpless and powerless all the time. I got to be honest, particularly if you're a man, a husband. Your wife does not want to be with someone that she perceives as feeling like they're always a victim and they're helpless and powerless. Because women are made with a desire for security. And there's nothing less secure than somebody that goes, I don't know, babe, everything around me is always impacting my life and there's nothing I can do about it and I just take whatever comes to me and Eeyore.
And the reality is, like, we are victims of certain things that have happened in our lives. All of us. There are things that have happened that are out of our control, but our responsibility is, what are we going to do with that? Are we going to allow that to be an excuse for not forgiving, giving that over to the Lord, really having this understanding of, it wasn't something that I did, but now I have to heal from that and allow the Lord to work in that in my life. And I still have these responsibilities of who God has called me to be, that what has happened to me needs to not be an excuse for not being who God is asking me to be.
Right. And you may see some of this showing itself up in your marriage in a couple of different ways, right? Obviously, this whole negativity idea of, someone that's constantly complaining about their spouse, right? Meaning if you're constantly hearing your spouse complaining about you, right? If you're constantly complaining about your spouse, either to your spouse or to other people, right? Because a lot of that complaining, the reality is we're combining two fallen human beings together into one marriage. So, of course, there's going to be the friction there of the reality that Andrea and I are very different people, and that's okay, right? That's how God made us. But so often the complaining that I'm doing with regards to Andrea actually needs to be solved by an adjustment in my own thinking and heart. And that doesn't necessarily mean that she's right, but it does mean that rather than complaining about it, there is some heart work that I need to do in how I respond to that. Because regardless of whether she's right or wrong, my response is my responsibility.
Yep.
So that constant complaining, the using past hurts as an excuse for how I behave
current
now,
behavior,
right? Man, I would treat you nicer if you hadn't have said those terrible things you said about me to your best friend 5 years ago, right? Or, man, if you hadn't had an affair early in our marriage, I would love you the way that I know that I'm hearing you want to be loved. Right?
Or even past hurts from other people. My parents did this to me when I was young, and that really affected who I've become. And so now I
Good point.
act out of that pain, and you just have to bear with it.
That's a
because
great
you just have to
point.
deal with it, because I deserve, it's almost this like, I deserve to act like this
Yeah, 'cause
and to
this
hurt
thing
you in the
happened to
process
me.
or whatever, because this thing happened to me. That is never the Lord's best for your life.
Right.
And it's not what God is calling you to.
Right. Right.
So-
And again, like Andrea said, there's a lot of times in our lives that we've been legitimately wronged.
Yep.
Right. That we are a victim as just a factual matter. If you're married, I guarantee you've been a victim of wrongful, meaning just right and wrongful behavior from your spouse, whether it's a harsh word, an affair, anger, whatever it is, selfishness. You have been wrong, but that's not. We're not really talking here about whether or not you actually were wronged. What we're talking about is, have you made that wrong a part of your identity? Right? Is your identity in the wrongful things that have happened to you? And have you allowed that identity to undermine you taking responsibility for your own actions and your own marriage and improving it by bringing your heart and your mind and your body into closer alignment with what God's desire is there, so that you can be the spouse that God calls you to be, rather than making excuses for why you can't be.
Yeah. And sometimes that's a process that renews over and over. There are things.
Yep, you're right.
There are things that that had happened to me when I was young. Some sexual abuse that I, praise the Lord, came to a point where I realized, man, this is affecting my marriage and I need to work on this. And so that was a process to work on that. But I couldn't, and I did use it as an excuse for a while in our marriage. But I came to a point, because of the Lord, where I realized that's not acceptable. And anytime I'm using that as an excuse, I need to say, okay, well, that is a huge red light, like a huge blaring siren that, okay, I need, this is needs to be worked on. And sometimes that rears its ugly head. Like I can go a long time without that being an issue, and then it comes back again. And when I'm starting in my head to use that as an excuse for, intimacy issues with us, or pulling away from Nathan, or whatever, stop using that as an excuse and say, this is just an indication that I need to work with the Lord on this, on this heart issue, and heal from that again. So
it's good.
Rather than saying, oh, this is just a good excuse, instead saying, yeah, no, this is a good reason to work on that with the Lord.
That's great. So that's what the victim mentality is. What's the effect of it on marriage? Well, there's really 5 things we identified here that we wanted to bring up specifically. The first one is an erosion of intimacy. So the first thing that's going to go when you have the victim mentality thing going on is the intimacy that you have with your spouse is just going to evaporate. And that will happen very quickly.
Yeah, and we're not necessarily talking about sexually, but just intimacy
that will definitely follow.
Yep, but intimacy in all ways.
If you're a man who's dealing with this victim mentality. But yeah, we're just talking about all the. I mean, go back. We did a video on the intimacy table. We're talking about all the different pillars of intimacy, not just sexual. But it will just go away rapidly, because it's really hard to be transparent and intimate with someone that always has an excuse.
Yeah.
Right, that always has a reason why, I can't be intimate about this thing. I can't discuss this. And, there's a lot of ways this shows up. And some of these examples aren't popular. But we run into couples all the time that can't do something that the Bible clearly directs them to do because they have a medical condition. Right? I have ADHD. I have post-traumatic stress from this situation that happened to me. I have allergies that make it really difficult for me to be awake at night long enough for my spouse and I to talk. I've heard just about all of them over the course of the couples that we've had an opportunity to speak with, and of course that destroys intimacy. Because there's nothing more frustrating to Andrea, because the reality of intimacy is we're sharing the deepest part of who we are, which means Andrea needs to have transparency and freedom to be able to share, like, hey, this is something that we're dealing with that's hurting me. Mm-hmm. And if I'm constantly responding with, well, sorry, I have a medical condition, or, sorry, I have dad issues from when I was growing up, she's going to stop feeling like she can bring those things up, because we can't talk about that then, because it's not my fault, it's somebody else's fault. And that's going to really destroy intimacy in our marriage, which leads pretty to a
communication breakdown.
The second one, which is
a communication breakdown. Yeah, how can you communicate with somebody who just continues to pull the victim card?
Yep.
They're just unwilling to see their role in what needs to change, and communication just breaks down then in all areas, really.
Right.
Is what we see.
Yeah, that's right. The third one, and this one's huge. The victim mentality basically always leads to unforgiveness, resentment, and bitterness. First and foremost, in the person who sees themselves always as the victim. Secondly, in your spouse. But resentment and bitterness that's an equal opportunity killer when it comes to marriage. It doesn't really matter which of the two of you are dealing with the unforgiveness and bitterness. It's going to splash over onto the other person all over the place. And if you're not really careful, that other person's going to themselves respond in unforgiveness, bitterness, and resentment. And pretty soon you start going down this resentment and bitterness spiral. And this is almost always the root cause for the couples that do the infamous mutual divorce.
Yeah.
Because what has happened is you have both gotten to a point where the resentment and bitterness has hardened away from emotional and is now just apathetic. Right? Like, I don't really care about being with this person anymore. And they don't really care about being with you, because you've both allowed your hearts to become hard and bitter and full of resentment towards each other. Flee from this. Resentment and bitterness will destroy your life.
Yep.
So flee from it. And you just can't. If you always have somebody else who's mistreating you and that's why you are the way you are, by definition, there is unforgiveness and resentment involved in that.
Of course.
Because someone is wronging you at all moments in your eyes, and that's the reason why you can't take control over your own life, which is gonna harm your marriage, and is basically never the case, if we're just being honest. We've met with all kinds of couples with all kinds of excuses about why someone else is preventing them from being the spouse they need to be, and my response to them is almost always, if I told you I would give you $1 million if you did this thing you're telling me you can't do for a week, you would find a way to do it. The issue is not that you can't do it, it's that you are improperly motivated to do it, which means your priority is not your spouse, in the case of what we're talking about. Because anyone can put up with any boss, no matter how crappy they are, if they're properly motivated the right way. Anybody can deal with any character flaw in their spouse if they're properly motivated. Anyone can deal with any in-laws or friends you don't like if properly motivated. The issue here is one of motivation, not one of victimhood.
Yeah, and our motivation should just be really an understanding of the Lord's heart.
That's right.
For our lives, our marriage,
That's right.
And that he has called us to think of things in an eternal way and not in a fair, temporary way.
Right. So hang on. If that offended you, what I just said, hang on a minute, because I want to come back around to that. Babe, why don't you give him the fourth one, and then we'll come back around that in the fifth
So
one.
power imbalance, it can create a really unhealthy power dynamic. It's really, we've seen in the people that we've talked to, it becomes a trump card.
Yeah.
To issues in the marriage or arguments or whatever.
Yeah.
The victim mentality has become this, well, here's my trump card, I win the argument kind of thing.
Right.
And it just creates this power struggle and imbalance in a
right.
marriage. It's
That's
not like, how do we work this together? How do we heal this together? How can I minister to this hurt and we get over this together?
Yeah.
It really is just this is the reason you need to shut up.
Right.
Kind of a thing.
Right. That's how it comes across. Right. That's right.
Yes. Right.
Okay. So here's the last one. And I said we were going to come back to it. This is really the reason why I come on strong when we talk about the victim mentality. There's just nothing that will hinder your growth as a human being more than this. Like, I think this is the single issue that just completely stagnates people in their lives. And there's a number of people you and I are friends with, have been friends with, have gotten a chance to know, where I look at their life and I'm like, you just never advanced past about 15. Mm-hmm. And now you're 40. Mm. And when I look at it, the reason is almost always because they became a victim. Maybe they actually became a victim of something horrible and then were never able to take responsibility for their reaction, for their response. Or maybe they just started imagining, the
world is against them. Yeah.
Right. But the net result is the same. It stops your growth. And I really feel for people. I mean, I'll be honest. I can have a difficult time sometimes respecting people like that too. Mm-hmm. Because life is about taking responsibility, and man, if you lose the ability to take responsibility, your life's over. I mean, you're from the standpoint of being able to grow as a human being, being able to grow spiritually, being able to
enjoy
grow
life
emotionally, being able to enjoy life, and it makes me so sad. And so I see folks like this, and I'm like, man, I wish I knew the right words to say.
That's exactly how I feel.
To people that are struggling with that, to help them break out of that. The problem is, there's always an excuse.
Yeah, Steve Peterson is somebody that has this. He's passed away, but he has this great ministry.
Called Fresh Start.
Thank you, Fresh Start. And one of his taglines was, "There's always more with the Lord."
Yeah.
And I just want to I wish people who we meet who are struggling with this kind of woe is me, or the world is against me. I wish that could really penetrate their hearts.
Yeah.
There's more with the Lord. He wants you to overcome this, and there's abundant life with God and his healing, and it's worth it.
No.
But that with this kind of victim idea, when we come across that in our own lives and with other people, that's kind of the theme that goes through my head all the time, is there's just more with the Lord. But it takes work to choose the things of the Lord. It takes work to allow the Lord to do the things he wants to do in order for us to overcome the schemes of the devil.
Right. So how do we overcome these things? Well, we've got a few just things that we would suggest to you, man. If you struggle with this in your life, and you can get, and even those that wouldn't say like, hey, this is something I struggle with often, the times when you do, let's just be real for a minute about how we break out of that.
Yeah.
Right. The first one, I'm not gonna camp out on this one a lot, because of course people that are struggling with a victim mentality, this is the one that they always have an answer for. But you got to take responsibility for your own responses. Like you have to recognize and admit that I have way more agency. I have way more control in my life than I like to think right now. And so I have to take responsibility for my responses. I just have to. I have to take responsibility for my marriage. Even though it seems like there are outside forces that have doomed it from the start, I have to take responsibility for this personally.
And the Lord never talks about what's fair. Like, if that's your focus, this isn't fair, and you're so laser focused on things being fair, and I deserve to be like this because this isn't fair. That's not part of the Lord's currency.
Right.
We have to sometimes take responsibility for things that aren't our fault.
Right. Well, it's the only way to do. I mean, it's the only way to live, because otherwise you're just sitting around waiting for someone else to go, oh, you're right, that actually is my fault. And that's very rarely going to happen. Our comment section of our channel is chock full of people that leave these big, long comments to our videos with every detail about why they can't do whatever thing it is that we were suggesting in that video. Our channel's pretty we try to be pretty practical, and there's every reason why they can't do it. And it really frustrates people because they'll write me these long, and I'm talking paragraphs of information, details about their spouse and the things their spouse has put them through and all that. And I think they must not have listened to very many of our episodes, because I think they expect me to write back and go, oh my gosh, you've been through such a horrible thing.
We're sympathetic for sure.
You definitely don't need to listen to what we said. And what I actually say is, of course, ma'am, sir, I'm so sorry to hear what you've gone through. And then depending on the air of arrogance or not that they put in the channel, I will respond with, what does that have to do with your response?
Yeah.
Because it's like we think that, hey, if someone treats us bad enough, then I don't have to take responsibility for my response anymore. And we do. That's what the Lord expects of us. Like the Lord, Jesus, who we sinned against and have continued to sin against and rebel against and choose idols over every day since the beginning of human history, since the fall. And yet he chose to come down, minister to us, live the perfect life, and die naked on a cross so that we would have an opportunity to spend eternity with him. And if my wife won't brush the kids' teeth, then she's the reason why our marriage is a mess. Like, do you understand the frustration that I have when I come across these kinds of situations? Because I don't know how you can really have an understanding of the gospel message and not be embarrassed by having a victim mentality. Because if anyone ever had an excuse for having a victim mentality, it was Jesus Christ. And yet he didn't. He chose to come down to earth as a filthy human, spend 30 years growing up and learning and loving his family, and then 3 years ministering to all of us, and then dying. But by us, by the way, us killing him. And yet he chose all that gladly because he was going to take responsibility for his response.
Right. And so Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. We have to know Scripture. We have to understand the Lord through his word in order to allow him to renew our minds, to understand this concept of the one that I say I dedicate my life to is the ultimate example of not being a victim. And so I need to understand the Lord better so that I can allow him to renew my mind, so that my focus becomes him and his work through the cross, that then can do work in my own heart.
Yeah. It's great. It's great. Did you have another verse you wanted to share too?
Sure. So there's like, so in Colossians 3, I think it's 12 through 15. It says, "Put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. And above all these things, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful." None of that says, yeah, when you're wronged, hold on to that.
That's right.
It's the opposite. Like,
That's right.
And this victim mentality is big in our world today. But God's pretty clear that his ways are better than our ways, and don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Pretty much anything that the world is about, God's going to be not about. So this victim, like, oh, we're a victim, self-help, you need to focus on your well-being, all that sort of thing. If the world is about it, God's probably not. And allowing the Lord to work on bringing you in harmony with others and the peace, and not being conformed to the patterns of this world, it's so important, and it's what God came here to do.
Right.
To make us completely different than the world, and that's how we choose to. We should be aliens of this world, and that doesn't mean, because I go to church and I sing worship songs and I don't listen to secular music. That's sure, those are good things,
and those kind of help to shift your perspective a little bit.
Sure. But the work really comes, the being aliens is not conforming to the patterns of the world,
right,
in unforgiveness, excuse making, being a victim, all of these things. That's the harder work of Christ changing, allowing Christ to do work in our heart. And those are the things that are going to change your life and the people that you live with and talk to and interact with, because it changes who you are.
Right. So what if you're the spouse of someone who struggles with the victim mentality? And if you are a spouse, you are to some degree,
sure,
because we can all struggle with this at times.
Put on love. We just
help. There's a couple of ways you can minister, I believe, to your spouse in this way. And again, biblically, ministering to our spouse is the primary responsibility that we have as married individuals, according to God's design. So, a couple things you can do: help your spouse to shift their perspective with regards to the way they look at the world. Now, this can be difficult if the conversation is complaints about you. Right, you may just need to not become a victim yourself and take responsibility for your response. But if it's about other external people and why all those people hate me, and that's the reason why we're not getting ahead or whatever, helping to shift the perspective to, okay, well, what can we be grateful about in this situation? Yeah, your boss is a jerk, but we have a job, and that brings in money for us to be able to have this house or this apartment or whatever, and we're grateful for that. And then also helping them to focus on solutions. Because one thing about the victim mentality is we get so caught up in the victimhood that nobody ever asks, okay, well, how can we fix this?
Right, and you can't control the other person, so what are you going to do?
That's right.
To fix where you're at.
That's right.
Yep.
If you have a difficult time with this, and your spouse maybe is in a continual loop of this, then it's okay to say, hey, why don't we go seek some professional help from a biblical counselor? Right? We never recommend secular counseling. I think it's incompatible with the biblical worldview, because so much about secular counseling is just at odds with what the Bible says about life. So I don't ever recommend secular counseling. I do recommend biblical counseling if there's a situation where like in this case where you guys cannot seem to figure it out, and maybe it's uncomfortable if your spouse deals with this. Maybe it's uncomfortable for you to go, hey, you've been a victim constantly for the last X number of years. You need to figure it out. So maybe it's easier to go, hey, why don't we go, I know you're struggling with these things. Why don't we go seek some, professional counseling to talk about this, and find a biblical counselor that can go, hey, this is not God honoring. Like living our lives completely out of control and believing that everyone around us is the problem in our life is not what the Bible teaches. It's not what God desires for human thriving.
Yeah, and I would say there's a difference sometimes between biblical counseling and Christian counselors.
I
So
agree.
I think we have to be careful that we're not just seeking out Christian counselors.
That's
because
right. That can mean a lot of things.
They can hang their hat on, I'm a Christian counselor, but they're not really living by biblical principle.
Yeah.
They're not giving counsel that's biblical.
Yeah.
Which
Sometimes
again,
what they mean is I go to church.
yeah. Which is, again, a reason that we need to know the word, because
Right.
we need to know if we're getting biblical counsel, right? And that's a hard thing to say, well, I'm seeking out to hear the truth. That may be hard.
Right.
But it needs to be Bible based and not just what a counselor, a quote Christian counselor who maybe goes to a Christian church thinks that you should do. It just has to be what the Lord says you should do,
That's right.
based on
That's right.
what the Bible says.
Look, sometimes these messages are hard ones to deliver, but I
They're
want you
hard
to know
for us,
if you-
too,
Yeah, I
to
totally agree with that.
live out.
If you're watching this, we want you to know that we care about you. We care about your marriage, but more importantly than what Andrea or I think about you or your marriage, God cares about you as His creation, and He desires you to be His son or His daughter. And as a son or daughter, He desires for the best things for you.
Yeah.
So, man, we we also desire that because we want God's best for your life, and that's why we deliver the difficult message. So if you're watching this, you have questions, this is something you struggle with and you just want prayer, love to have you reach out to us. You can put a message in the comments below if you're watching this video on YouTube. If you're watching it on podcast, or listening to it through our website, marriagebydesignpodcast.com, you can certainly shoot us an email. That email address is marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll respond to all the emails that we receive. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Appreciate you being here. Remember, God is for your marriage.
Thanks so much for listening. We just wanted to say, if you have a comment, a question, something that you're struggling with or need prayer, please reach out to us. You can get a hold of us by emailing marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com, or of course you can comment on any of our social media and we will get back to you. But if you have something private, feel free to email us. We're personally respond to you.
That's right. And we do respond to every comment that we receive, either through our website, through YouTube, through our social medias, which leads me to feel free to pop over to our website, marriagebydesignpodcast.com. You can leave comments on any of our videos through that site. We would love to be able to connect with you, but please don't hesitate to reach out. Even if you just need prayer, you need someone to hear what you're going through, we're here for the Marriage by Design community, so feel free to reach out anytime. Until then, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you next time.